Hi guys, so as you can see I've got my my sprues out, and the reason for that is I'm going to be doing some big terrain pieces soon and I want to get lots of trees. So I thought, well, I'll have a go at making some trees out of some sprues. So I've got this little guy so I can get a rough size of what I want. Obviously I don't want the trees too big, but obviously don't want them too small basically. So yeah, using this little guy as obviously a sort of a reference size, I kind of want the tree to sort of go up, the tree trunk to go up just above his head, and then obviously the canopy, the bushy sort of tree bit, leafy bit at the top, sort of starting just above his head and then going up for, well, just a couple of inches really. So I say I don't want the trees to be too big, because I want them to be sort of, I want to make quite a few of them and I want them to look quite sort of like a foresty area. So yeah, so that seems like a good enough size to go for. Then we can take our sprues and start cutting up some long lengths. So generally I like to take the outer edges of the sprues off, and then cut off all the all-important nibbly-knobbly bits. Obviously we don't need them on this, but obviously keep them to one side as they can then be put in a jar of acetone to turn into ooey gooey spruey stuff. So yeah, basically just a case of going through, making sure we got lots and lots of lengths. As I'm not too sure how many I'm going to need, I basically cut up loads. And then yeah, I'm basically going to cut them longer than I need, because ideally I want to sort of put them together and then bend them, and then I can sort of cut them down to the sort of size I need. So yeah, I'm kind of cutting them down so they're longer than I really need to begin with, just because then I can obviously cut off any excess bits afterwards. I'm going to use the super glue for this rather than the cement glue, just because obviously the super glue does dry a whole lot quicker. Although personally I hate using the super glue, especially like this, where I am going to get it on my fingers, because I absolutely hate this stuff, because yeah, obviously it does stick fingers really well, and then once it's on your fingers it's obviously dries hard, and then you have a nice layer of it on your fingers and you can't feel anything. So yeah, I really do hate using super glue, but I say just because it is fast and quick, that's why I am sort of persevering and putting up with it basically. Once I've got enough for sort of like a reasonable sized tree trunk, then it's a case of getting a good old flame out. As I say, I want to sort of bend the top bits into the branches, and the bottom bits I'm going to sort of bend out as though they're the... so just a case of heating it up really, and then sort of bending it. Yeah, as simple as that really. Just to say guys, I am doing this in a well ventilated area, because obviously sometimes this does give off obviously like a little bit of a black smoke. As you can see there, sometimes it does set on fire as well. So yeah, obviously blew that out. So yeah, so this is a well ventilated area I'm doing this in. So make sure if you are going to do this, then you do the same basically. Although one thing I kind of realised I have done here, I possibly glued too much of the sprues together. As ideally I wanted to sort of bend more of the edges or ends of the sprues. I say this is the first time I've had to go doing it this way, and yeah, sometimes you do things and you kind of learn by your mistakes, or you learn a better way of doing something. But yeah, I say I just want a bit of fun. I would go a bit of melting these with the old flame, just because that's obviously a bit of a giggle. But yeah, as you'll see at the end, it isn't a bad result that I get from this. Once the branches and the roots are all bent, then it's a case of just sort of shaving off or slicing off basically all the sort of straight edges that are on the sprues for the trunk. So yeah, pretty simple really. I say it's just a case of trying to scrape off as much as you can, just so it isn't sort of sharp edges. I mean the next bit coming up will sort of obviously hide a lot more of this as well, but it's always good just to try and sort of, I say, shave off those hard bits. And again, all these little shavings, they'll be put into one place and then put into the jar to make ooey gooey spruey stuff that we will use later on. To help for support, so this thing doesn't obviously wibble wobble and then fall over, I've basically got a washer, and I'm just going to heat up the bottom bit, well, or set fire at the bottom bit, and then push it down. Although I do eventually put on some super glue as well, just because as much as this does sort of stick to it, the super glue will make sure that obviously it won't come apart. To make the trunk of the tree look more like bark, again we're going to put it over the flame just to sort of start heating the plastic up, and then we're going to get a sharp tool, and then we can drag it along the plastic just to sort of make some grooves into it. And yeah, basically you keep doing this and it does sort of make it look more sort of like tree trunky effect. Basically making it look like obviously the ridges and all that kind of stuff within the tree. So whilst I am setting fire to this tree, just want to say a big shout out and thank you to all the patrons for helping support the channel and enabling me to keep on buying more bits and pieces so I can keep trying out new things and new sort of experiments really. So yeah, much appreciated guys, and obviously if you want to help support the channel and see some behind the scenes footage of what I'm currently working on before it comes to YouTube, there's a link down below and there will be a link at the end of the video. I also want to thank Artiscapade, Easy Roller Dice and Anycubic for all the help and support they give the channel as well. So thanks so much guys. So I think the end result's pretty cool, and yeah, it does look like sort of bark texture. The size isn't too bad, it's a little bit taller than I kind of first imagined. So I think if I was to make loads of these, what I would do is I'd make the tree trunk separate and then I would add on branches on the top. As that way you would be able to get it exactly the right sort of size, height and all that you want. So that's why I say, because I think it's a bit too tall, I'm just going to trim off the top and then basically reattach some bits to make the branches. Again, that's what I love about this hobby. It is all a case of trying new things, seeing how they work. And yeah, you sort of learn by your mistakes, or not necessarily mistakes, but you can sort of improve on the sort of the next version or the next one. So yeah, so definitely make the tree trunk separate and then obviously cut some bits out. Obviously all the nibbly knobbly bits, cut them off. And yeah, make some sort of branches separately and then just attach them really. A lot simpler. So I hadn't used this cement glue for quite some time, which is why the nozzle has somehow got obviously blocked up with glue in it. And obviously a nice little easy trick to unclear the nozzle is basically put it over a flame. As you can see here, I started squeezing the tube and turned this into a little mini flamethrower, which again made me chuckle, because if you're watching the live stream when I was doing it, I did do it quite a few times, just because, as I say, sometimes it's the simple little things in life that kind of put a smile on my face and make me giggle. So yeah, I did have fun with that. So yeah, just attach them on. Although I think I do actually end up using some super glue, just because again, this cement glue is really good, but it's not the quickest of obviously glues, and sometimes when you're holding something for a few seconds, it feels like an eternity. So yeah, I think the old super glue did come out in the end. To make the canopy, or well, the top part of the tree, I'm going to use these silicone moulds, and obviously the ooey gooey spruey stuff. And the reason for using the silicone moulds is basically I can make some sort of like half-rounded domed bits, which I can then sort of cut up and glue together. And the other good thing about using these is when I put the ooey gooey spruey stuff in, I can basically squish it out so it's very thin. So rather than using like a big solid chunk of the ooey gooey spruey stuff, it's basically going to be a thin layer, which obviously makes it nice and, well, thin. And the other thing to bear in mind when using the ooey gooey spruey stuff, the thicker it is, the longer it takes to sort of like firm up and go back to being, well, hard plastic. So yeah, so is this a case of, I tried to use a spoon but that didn't quite work. So yeah, using the gloves, it is a case of just pushing this stuff round so it fills out the inside of the silicone mould. And I say, I'm just trying to make it nice and thin, because yeah, the thinner it is, the quicker obviously the acetone evaporates, and the sooner this stuff goes back to being a hard plastic. Because I have done some sort of sheets of this stuff before, and I've had them, I don't know, sort of 3-4 millimeters deep, and it has taken ages for these to refirm up. So yeah, the thinner here, the better. And I say, it's nice and lightweight as well. So these were left for about 5 hours, which I say, because these are pretty thin, was enough for them to sort of dry out. And yeah, so basically taking them all out, and again, there's no sort of real pattern here. It is just sort of making them look like a bushy kind of tree, I guess. So I'm going to use obviously one of the bigger ones as sort of the main centre focal point. And then yeah, it's just a case of obviously cutting the others. Again, these cut really easy. I mean, you can cut them with scissors, or you can cut them with a small blade, obviously. I forgot to mention that 3D printed part you just saw me holding is actually from, I think it's Gloomhaven, a free tree you can get on Thingiverse. And obviously that gave me the rough idea of how this was going to obviously look, or how I wanted it to look, basically. So yeah, nice and simple. So you just cut bits out, put them where you think they're going to go, and then obviously just glue them. Yeah, nice and simples. And there we go, one rough shape of the treetop. And then obviously I want to put some sort of like pattern into this, or not necessarily a pattern, but sort of texture. And the easiest and best way of doing that is to get some more spruey gooey stuff, basically sort of like paste it over, and then use the tool just to sort of manipulate it, drag it, move it around, and kind of like put some indentations in it. Basically just sort of rough it up so it looked like it would be some sort of bushy tree, really. And once that's done to the full area, it kind of looks like this. Because that layer of sprue goo was very thin, it doesn't take long for it to obviously harden up. And I'm just going to use a little bit more around the base of this, just to sort of fill out the base a little bit more, and to try and make those roots that I had before, well, you can hardly see them. So again, using a bit of the sprue goo, just sort of making some sort of roots at the bottom, and just to fill in any little nooks, crannies, holes and bits and pieces. And there we go, it's given a little coat of primer, and now ready to paint. And I'm going to use the good old contrast paints here, just because they're quick, simple, and obviously easy to use basically. So yeah, using the brown for the base, and it's just a case of slapping it all over. So that's the good thing with these contrast paints, you can obviously put them on nice and thick. Well, I say thick, you load the brush up fully, and the great thing about using these is obviously it stays darker in the recesses, and it's lighter on the highlighted top areas, which is pretty cool. So doing a similar sort of thing to the top, although this time I did go over the sort of tree top with a green sort of base coat, and then yeah, good old green contrast paint over the rest of it. So just in case, guys, if you see this little paint holder I'm using, it's one of the very first things, or I think it might be the second thing that I ever made out of sprues, and yeah, it's pretty awesome as I've never had any of my paints fall over. And there we go, it's all done, and that's how it's turned out. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it does look. Yeah, I like the foliage at the top, and say the tree trunk itself, I think it's come out really well, and does have a good sort of texture to it. Yeah, really pleased. The only problem though with this is the fact that it takes so long in between each sort of process, where you basically have to wait for bits to obviously dry or re-harden, and then when you do run out of ooey gooey spruey stuff, you have to obviously wait while you make some more. So to make loads of trees, what I've done instead is I 3D printed one, which is obviously this one, say the Gloomhaven one. Come out really well, obviously. But then I thought, well, why print them when I can have a go at casting them, and that's what I've done here. So in the next video, guys, I'm going to show how I made a mould of the 3D printed one, and then obviously recasted, or casted, however you want to say it, my own ones. So yeah, that'll be in the video next week, and I'll go through obviously the costs of the resin compared to 3D printing. So hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, give it a like, leave some comments down below, subscribe if you're new, all that good stuff. Yeah, take care, bye for now.